and welcome to the channel. I have so much to tell you, even though the last book video I made like 5 days ago. Because in the first couple days of August, I have read a book that I've had a lot of thoughts about. And I can't wait for the August wrap-up I'm going to do at the end of the month. There's too many thoughts, I've got too much to say, I gotta say it now and get it out of my head so I can stop thinking about it, because I'm thinking about it so much. And that book is this one, City of Veils. Is that where? Yeah. By Zoe. I know how to say the first name. Ferraris? Possibly? And I found out, of course, after starting it, that it's kind of a sequel, but also kind of not. It's a standalone novel, but there was a novel written before it that includes at least 2 of the same characters, 2 of the 4 same main characters, called Finding Noof, which that one I'm much less sure of pronouncing correctly, so whatever that book is. You may or may not want to read it before reading this one. I found this very satisfying all on its own. There were some times that they referred to stuff that happened in the previous book in a way that you could tell they were talking about another book that had happened before rather than regular backstory. Just kind of a way that authors do that. Everything you needed to know to understand what was going on in the book was in the book. So you could understand the characters and their history well enough by what is told in this book. You don't need to have read the first book to understand what's going on. So if you watched my big library sale haul I did a while ago, you'll know I picked this up at a library sale for like $1, and the reason I picked it was because I have recently been wanting to know more about Middle Eastern culture and wanting to hear more stories about Muslim women. So this looked like something that would be a good choice, being written by a woman and seeming to be about women, and from the the description, they're solving the murder of a woman, so I was very interested in that. To understand where the author's coming from, it's really useful to read her little blurb she's got at the back. Apparently, Zoe Ferraris moved to Saudi Arabia in the aftermath of the First Gulf War to live with her then-husband and his extended family of Saudi Palestinian Bedouins, which she mentions Bedouins, or Bedouins, however it's said, several times in the book as people who were desert dwellers. Now she lives in San Francisco and Lexington, Kentucky. So I guess she moves between them. But the point is, she went there with her husband because he was moving to be with his family, possibly. And one of the 4 main characters in this is a woman who has moved to Saudi Arabia to be with her husband, who is a bodyguard to one of the princes, who doesn't particularly need a bodyguard. There's like a bajillion princes, but apparently they like to have a bodyguard for the importance it lends them. But basically her husband has moved to Saudi Arabia because he likes the culture. He fought in a war there, and he really came to appreciate the culture, and he completely ignores the fact that his wife is extremely uncomfortable with the culture, where they have an apartment outside of where the Americans usually live, so he could be more involved with the culture, even though that means that his wife has to wear the full, apparently it's a 3-piece thing with a cloak, headscarf, and a burqa, which I had understood that the burqa was, how it worked was it was all one thing, like, but and that it always had a grill, but apparently only some burqas have the grills over the eyes, and most of them have a slit, and the burqa is a separate piece from the headscarf that attaches around the back with a with Velcro, and so it's like a mask thing, but you can apparently flip it up and down really easily. Like, you flip it up when there aren't any men around and you're indoors, but then you flip it back down when a man comes in, and you always wear it down when you're outside, is what it sounds like. And yeah, so when this American woman leaves her apartment, she has to wear all of that, or the religious police, who have the same authority as regular police, but their whole job is to go around picking on women who don't dress correctly, or men who don't dress correctly, or anyone who does anything that doesn't go along with religion, as opposed to the regular laws. Anyone who breaks a religious law, they can get into huge trouble for that, and they drag people off and have like hidden places where you can't get them back from, and it's all very creepy. And woman alone is in particular danger. It became clear fairly quickly that the woman who is writing this, the author, is a feminist, and I like her quite a lot. I like her book quite a lot. But at the beginning, the book brought out a lot of feminist anger in me. Part of it was the culture shock of the whole, realizing that it really is true, that that's how it is in like relatively modern Saudi Arabia, not even just in, I knew that was how it was in places that ISIS and other extremist groups have taken over, but I didn't realize it was so much true in the regular government approved big city places. So culture shock was part of it, but there was also the individual men that were one of the main character men, and then the main character's husband, who she's moving to live with, the one who seems to be modeled at least partially after the author's life. Her husband is a horrible, horrible jerk who doesn't care about his wife. And then basically through the first bit that I got through while I was reading it the first day, was just very upsetting to me because of how the women were being treated, and not the women, any choices that women made themselves didn't bother me a bit. I don't care if you want to dress up that way. That's fine and lovely. I like to dress up and cover myself a lot more than a lot of people do in America. A lot of women do. I feel very uncomfortable in a lot of clothes that a lot of women here feel very comfortable in. None of that bothers me at all. What bothers me is when the men pick on the women and tell them they have to do this, they have to not do that, etc., etc. And when someone who is supposedly loves his wife, and she clearly loves him very much, doesn't care about her feelings at all, which is clearly shown. And then this lady also she's on a return trip. She's been on vacation in the States, and she's coming back to Saudi Arabia to be with her husband now. They've been in that country for 6 months, and she went away from it. Now she's coming back. While she's on the plane, she has an encounter with a horrible sexist man. And then Miriam is her name. When Miriam gets there, she's shoved into a room for, what are they called? Unclaimed women, until her husband gets there to pick her up, which you can imagine offended my sensibilities. Which he was late because he forgot what time she was getting there, i.e. didn't care. So yeah, basically I wanted to strangle every male character till a certain segment in. So then how it happened was I had been at work while I was reading, because my job is basically something where I have to be on call and be available, and so I have a lot of free time to read there. So when it was time for me to go home, that was where I was, wanting to strangle lots of men. And then on my drive home, which is about half an hour long, there was nasty traffic and stupid drivers. And so by the time I got home, I was just ready to pop on any male person that I happened to see. So luckily, my dad was tucked away around the corner in the living room quietly reading, and my brother was way back in his room also not making any noise, probably playing on the computer. So fortunately, the first person I encountered was my mom in the kitchen, and so I was able to rant to her and feel much better. Ranted to her both about the book and the driving issues. And then I took a break and watched some YouTube and stuff, and then I went back to reading because I was very curious, because there was a relationship that had caught my interest, which is the one between two of the other main characters. Miriam is one main character, then there's Katya is another, then Nair and Osama. So two female main characters and two male main characters. And the relationship between Katya and Nair, even though Nair was a sexist jerk, he wasn't really a sexist jerk. He was just blinded by the interpretation of Islam that he had been given, so that he couldn't see that there was a problem with what he wanted from this girl Katya. Basically wanting her to quit her job and be a home baby maker for him. They weren't married yet, but if they were going to get married, that's what he would want from her. And he was not marrying her because he didn't think she'd probably going to be doing that, which is true. But their relationship intrigued me, just because I got the vibe that he was going to be the one who was going to be changing throughout the book. And then this other character, Osama, who is the only male character at that point in the book that I didn't want to strangle, he is an investigator, or detective. He's a detective, and he caught the case of this young woman who had not yet been identified, and who the whole book is about solving the murder of. And he was interesting because he was also clearly a feminist, and he tried to do his job and practice what he could in order to help take care of women and help do things, do what he thought was right, even though it wasn't really following the rules. So then I got through a fair amount more of it that night and got some more satisfying bits that weren't making me so angry, because I found more feminist characters, and more male characters were introduced who weren't terrible, who had no particular desire to strangle, which would be mainly people surrounding Katya. She has a cousin and a father and a co-worker who are all very nice. Her dad has some issues because his neighbor, who he's friends with, kind of got him more into practicing Islam in such a way that it's more sexist. There are a lot of different interpretations of Islam, and various ones are not nearly as sexist. And so meeting those male characters made me a lot happier. And also Nair, a lot of the book is focused on all four of these people's journeys and how they change. And I really liked all of their storylines. They each have one. And Miriam's is the only one that's really I didn't like and skipped some parts of, because it was just very frustrating, because she had the thing that happens with a lot of not great marriages, where she basically refuses to believe that her husband has been doing anything bad or doesn't love her. And even though it's very clear to any outsider that that's how it is. And so her journey is a lot more painful and frustrating to read. But the other three I really enjoyed. Also, I like Miriam as a person. She just has that one gigantic blind spot. Also, this video is probably going to be quite rambly, because I have very rambly thoughts, and I have a lot of thoughts on very different things, and then those thoughts lead to other thoughts that are kind of seem unrelated from the thing that you started with. So we'll just see where this goes, but I'm going to start a new section now, since that's about as far as I can get without getting any spoilers as far as talking about the characters. If I talk more about the characters, I'll have to get into spoilers. So now I'm going to move on to more abstract thoughts that this book made me have, kind of prompted without really being about that. So clearly sexism is a huge theme for this book, as is religion and the interpretation of it, and how you can interpret it in multiple ways, and you can use it to oppress people. And so that made me think, obviously, of how my own religion, Christianity, has been used to oppress people and has been used as the excuse for a whole lot of wars, and made me think of how glad I am we have a separation of church and state, and how I think that makes it harder to oppress people with religion if you have that, because then there's a lot more personal choice involved, obviously, and there's a lot more, you can only police the people who actually are in your religion, and people can choose to not be of that religion but still live in the same place. So yeah, and it made me think of how frustrating it is that Christianity has been used to hold women back a lot, and how I want that to change from the inside, and how it has changed a lot from the inside so far, and how there are a lot of really great women at my personal church, but how I can still see sexism there and how I want to change that. And it also, of course, reminded me of my cousin's church down in the South, Georgia? Yeah, Atlanta, so Georgia, and all the lovely Southern Christians who don't let women pray when they're in a mixed group, and they don't let women preach, and just all sorts of nonsense. And how my cousin actually believes that. And other than that, I really love my cousin. He's a wonderful man, but oh my gosh. Fortunately, he has a very strong-willed feminist sister, so she can argue with him instead of me having to do it. Okay, so back to more specifically what the book actually is rather than what it prompted. It's pretty much a straightforward murder mystery. I mean, the murder isn't straightforward. There's a lot of complicated stuff going on. And because we have the 4 viewpoints, we have 4 main characters who are involved in the investigation. So there's a lot of complications there because we get into each of their personal lives as well as what they're doing for the investigation. But other than that, it's very much the format of your usual murder mystery. From reading the recommendations on the back and the blurb about what it's about, I very much expected more conspiracy stuff going on, but really it's very much not. It's very much, there's some complications surrounding this girl's murder because she was involved in some things, but not like government conspiracies, just like very small conspiracies with like 5 people. But a very enjoyable one and a very realistic one, I felt. The way it was written felt very well researched, and also, of course, the woman had actually lived in Saudi Arabia, but she probably wasn't an investigator, so she would have had to research all of that. Okay, so those were my biggest thoughts on the book. Oh, one more thing is, I really liked the quality of the writing. The quality of the writing was really good. The plot made sense, which I really appreciate when that happens. The management of the four perspectives was done really well. I only skipped some parts of Miriam's because it was just really depressing, but only like a page or 2, not very much. And the only complaint I have on the writing quality is that at the end there's a big dramatic, I don't think this is a spoiler really, there's a big dramatic spending time in a sandstorm issue that could have been avoided if Miriam had just jumped off a camel instead of letting it take her off into the desert with no water, which quite frankly, if a horse was taking me, I know I have fallen off a horse before, and I fell off the horse while it was full on running, and I was fine, which I recognize a camel apparently according to the book is about twice as high as a horse. However, it was kind of sedately walking, and she might have been bruised, but I doubt she would have broken anything if she fell in any kind of knot on her head. And that whole part that leads into isn't a big part of the investigation plot. It's more a big piece of, more for the purpose of both excitement and tension, because it's very dangerous, and being in the desert in a sandstorm, and character development. it would have been more believable if there was a better reason for her staying on that camel / getting out there in the first place, like maybe trying to find somebody or something, if she had a clue that led her off that direction or something. But just staying on to not get injured when the other danger was being let off, she wouldn't have known about the sandstorm, but being let off into the middle of the desert, away from the road with no water, makes a little sense. But like, I'm a total Westerner, and I know that that would be horrendously dangerous. And maybe I've had more experience with falling off big creatures than she has, but still, it takes a pretty bad logic to think that it was less dangerous to go off into the desert on this animal who you don't know where he's going than to just jump off. So that's my only complaint. It was a very satisfying ending, and other than that, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to say the spoilers in a moment, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear them. Basically, it ends pretty dang happily. Everything's relatively resolved. It's not as resolved as I like. I like everything to be tied in a real neat bow, but you can see that everything's very much on the path to being very happy, so it didn't bother me too much. Basically, all the worst of the sexists are either dead or in jail, and the one main character who was medium sexist is reformed now and has changed his ways. So basically, very nice, happy ending, very satisfying, very unrealistic, but very happy. So I enjoyed this book very much. It was super thought-provoking. It made me have a lot of thoughts that I haven't really shared in this video because they're just kind of random. I wanted to keep this, cohesive. But if you would like to have your thoughts on these sorts of topics provoked, you should totally get it. City of Veils by Zoe Ferraris, and possibly it does have spoilers for the previous book in it, so if you don't like spoilers, you should read the first book, Finding Newf, first. So check them out, and if you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Also, if anything that I've said has provoked thoughts in you, then feel free to share them too. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!